Welcome back, everybody. Today is awesome weather and I'm very excited to be out here and actually see how these prototype Simon line balances fly. I've got a version 2 and a version 3, and I'm gonna be comparing them to 15 overstable mids that range from all kinds of different companies. So we're gonna see where they kind of fit in the rest of the market. First up is the version 3 prototype. This one is gonna be a lot straighter than the version 2. Not a lot straighter, but straighter. All right, so that actually pushed straight, but had great torque resistance, didn't really want to turn a whole lot, pushed straight, and then faded. All right, here is version 2. This one's gonna be a little bit more stable. Okay, so I actually put that on a little bit of Anheuser. And man, those are gonna be some great discs. I'm so excited for them. Have them in my bag because they're not as stable as Pyros. They are pretty stable. I feel like they're closer to a Pyro than they are a Hex, but they're gonna be some sweet discs to have in the bag. I had to move my camera. There was a lot of noise and stuff going over there. I'm just gonna throw them all again. We'll start with version 3 Simon line balance prototype. Version 2. All right, I put that second version on a little bit more Anheuser, but it definitely pushed out there really straight. All right, so now I'm gonna throw the version 1 Simon line balance. This came out in the Gyropalooza boxes. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through MVP's overstable mids, and then Discmanias, and then some Discraft, and then a couple other little brands. Not little brands, but a couple other brands. I don't have very much selection on them, that's why I said little. There's a little inventory. So, all right, here we go. So stable. That thing really is basically a Pyro. I mean, it feels different than a Pyro, flies just like it. Pyro's up next. This is a Neutron Pyro. I have a Fission Pyro after that. Before I throw them, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. Yeah, we're trying to grow the channel. That Pyro, that Neutron Pyro, is actually a pretty understable Pyro. It's one of the ones I had in my bag for a while, and it's all black, it's jet black, and for whatever reason it flies decently straight. So that's a bad representation of what a Pyro normally flies like. But it's neither less, it's still more stable than the other Simon line balances. And then here's this Fission Pyro. Fission Pyro definitely pushes more straight than the Neutron, but the balances seem to hold that straighter line longer. The Pyro, as soon as it wants to slow down, it wants to just kind of fall out of the air instead of glide to the ground. These last two MVP and streamline discs are the deflector and the runway, and I know both of these are very overstable. Haven't ever thrown this one, but generally speaking, it's a 5304. It should be very overstable, and I've known this is overstable because I've thrown it. So we'll throw this first. This is probably I would say one of the most overstable MVP streamline discs I got. That just wants to get to the ground. All right, deflector's up next. Ah, that one's even more overstable. That was a bad throw, but I could just tell that those two discs are way more overstable than the balances. Just take my word for it. Don't need to go get them and throw them again. They're more overstable. All right, now we're gonna get into some Discmania. Got a Method here. The Method is probably, not Method, Mutant. This Mutant is gonna fly about like those last two discs. Yeah, that Mutant is basically just like the last two discs. All right, it's not gonna MD5. It's not gonna be quite as overstable as that Mutant, but it's still gonna be a pretty overstable disc. That was it. I've seen people throw some MD5s that aren't as stable as that one, but that one, for whatever reason, is very much overstable. That was a bad throw. That was a spike hyzer, but it's very overstable. This is an MD4. This is Gannon Burr's MD4, and I've actually never thrown an MD4, so kind of anxious to see what this flies like. Hey! Hey, that was actually not near as overstable as I thought it was going to be. That was actually a really good flight. That's a workable overstable mid. I would say that was comparable to the Pyro, probably. Now I've got this Method. A Method to me feels like a Malta or a Rock 3. Has that similar feel. It's kind of got a bead and it's got this very concave part under the flight plate, or the rim. So, Mutant, C-line Mutant. Golly, I keep saying Mutant instead of Method. It's a Method. C-line Method. There we go. This you should get some pretty straight flight out of before it hyzers. I've thrown Methods before, I've never thrown this one, but Methods typically are pretty straight discs with a good fin. Okay, that is just straight. Okay, that's just dead straight. That was extremely straight. If I would have thrown that higher, I would have got some finish to it, but that is not very stable at all. If you end up getting a Simon Line Balance version 2 or 3 and you compare it to a Discmania MD3, they're actually very, very, very similar. If you hold them side by side, they're not exact, but they're very, very similar. So I'm anxious to see if this Iron Samurai 3 flies like the Simon Balance, or the Simon Line Balance. Everybody is out. Everybody and their mom and their sister and their dog and their cousin and their nephew are all out because the weather is awesome. And so I don't blame them. That's why I'm out. But it's very frustrating when we're trying to shoot a video. But anyways, Iron Samurai 3, I feel like it's going to be the closest thing to the version 2 and version 3 balance. Yeah, I mean, I've thrown a lot of MD3s. And I feel like that Iron Samurai 3 is a slightly more stable version. The blue one, for whatever reason, to me is, but flies very, very, very close to the balance. Now I'm gonna go to a disc I don't know a whole lot about. It's the Loft Silicon, and I've heard it's pretty stable. Never thrown it. We're gonna throw it. You guys get to see it first. But yeah, we'll see where it fits in. Okay, that flew surprisingly straight, and it flew a lot like the Balance. That's pretty interesting. This is what we got here going on today, ladies and gentlemen. A whole, look at that. Yeah, that's how busy the park is today. It's busy. All right, now we've got this one I've heard is very overstable. It is called, I forgot what it's called, Swarm. It's a Discraft Swarm. It's probably comparable to an MD5 or a Mutant or something like that. It's supposed to be very overstable. Oh my gosh, yeah. All right, so that was very overstable. That's like the Mutant or the Runway or the Deflector, I think. I don't remember. I don't ever throw that MVP mid-range. I think it's called a Deflector. I'm not sure. Anyways, we're gonna get to some Maltas. I got a Z Malta, and then I got an ESP Malta, and then I have this Halo Rock 3. And what's cool about a Rock, and I never realized this, but a Rock 3 and a Malta have a very similar shape to the disc, I mean, it feels very, very close. So I'm anxious to see how this compares to these two, but we'll throw this disc I've never thrown before. This is a Z Malta. Got so many discs in my head right now. Yeah, I think that that Z Malta is more stable than the balances. ESP Malta, there we go. That was low, but definitely less stable than the Z. And then last but not least, this Rock 3. I put that on some anhyzer, and that was actually not near as stable as what I thought it was going to be. That actually held and panned and turned a lot more than what I thought. So anyways, all right, so after I came in, edited the video, watched the discs fly, kind of reflected on all of it, I want to give you guys my honest opinion on the balances compared to the rest of the market and where I think MVP or Axiom is at. And these are just my opinions, but I want to give them to you and I want to be fair about it. And when I was out there and I was throwing them, I kind of had an idea in my mind, but coming back home and kind of reflecting on it kind of gives me a better sense of all of it. To kind of, if I can find the video of Simon or the text of Simon or whatever I seen, I know that Simon was wanting the disc to be kind of like a Vector. A Vector was an MVP disc, and it has a 2 fade, which is actually in between a hex and a pyro. A hex's fade is 1, and then a pyro's fade is 2.5. And so I was thinking somewhere between a hex and a pyro. And when they came out with this first version, if you go on Axiom's website and look up a balance, it's a 5403, I believe, and an 03 is definitely more stable than a pyro. And so I don't know if they're gonna put new flight numbers out for these prototype balances versus the version 1 balance, but the version 1 balance, after throwing it, it feels different than a pyro, and I always say it flies like a pyro, but I actually think it's slightly more stable than a pyro. It's pretty stable. I guess it depends on which pyro you have. I guess it depends on the type of pyro you have. If you have a proton pyro or certain pyros, they are pretty stable. But so the protons, I would say, are still pretty stable. You can definitely put them on anhyzer and they're not going to turn a whole lot, and they still fade. If you rip it out there flat, it does go straight for a minute, but it definitely has some fade. And so I feel like these are, if you have a beaten pyro, a seasoned pyro, it's probably, the numbers to me are probably closer to like a 5502, maybe a 5502.5. Some of the pyro's numbers I don't agree with. I think the pyro is actually more stable than a 2.5, but you know, that's my opinion. After all that being said, I do think that I was anticipating them to be a little bit straighter of a flying discs. Now I will have a further review on them. I'm gonna go out and just throw these discs alone and really dive in deep on how these discs fly, and is the second version any more stable than the third version. I know the parting line's a little lower, but I don't know if I could tell a really big difference out there. I know I said in the video that the second version is supposed to be more stable than the third version, but I don't know if I noticed a difference the amount of times I've thrown them. What I will say is I think these 3 discs are probably the closest thing to it. If you could find a really stable MD3 from Discmania, it's probably gonna fly and feel similar to a Simon line balance, the prototypes 2 and 3. I don't know if it may be slightly more stable than an MD3. Probably between an MD3 and an MD4. I don't know. This is a pretty stable MD3. If you have an MD3 and it just goes dead straight with a little bit of finish, that's not going to be what a balance is. A balance is, they're a little bit more stable. but it probably to me was really closest to the Z Malta. I felt like the Malta pushed straight and then started to hyzer and kind of held it. I feel like that it's somewhere between a Malta and a MD3, somewhere in there. So that's my honest opinions, and I want to thank you guys for watching. I will be coming out with another video on strictly just the balances. I want to do a video on them, mainly because I want to put them in my bag. And I feel like the balance to me is a much more comfortable backhand feel than a pyro. When I first got a pyro, I was like, man, I don't know how that feels. I love it on a forehand. I got used to it on a backhand. I don't mind it on a backhand. But when I got these balances and I held them, I'm like, man, they feel, I will say the balance feels very good. And so really like the way the balance feels. It has a little bit of dome to it. I think the numbers on a balance on these specific balances should be a 5502. It's just my take. So I think if one of these balances do get picked, I think Simon will pick the second version because it's supposed to be slightly more stable, and I think you can beat it in and really get a good seasoned disc that holds the stability. And I don't know, it'll be interesting to see. Simon's arm is also a lot faster than my arm. Simon, you know, if Simon's building a disc for himself, this may be the perfect disc. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where all this goes. So anyways, I want to thank you guys for watching, and sorry to talk your ear off. I just, I don't know, excited about discs, and that's just my thoughts. Catch you guys in the next one. Go in peace and be blessed.